Well, it was past midnight as I drove home from my new job. The pay wasn't so good, and it was far from home, but I really had no choice considering I was behind on rent. Exhausted from working a long day, I just wanted to get home and sleep. I thought I knew the way back, but I have arrived during daylight hours when it was easier to manage my new surroundings. Streetlights were scarce, which I didn't notice until the afternoon, and had to make matters worse, it was snowing. Somewhere along the way, I must have taken a wrong turn, and soon I was completely lost. After driving aimlessly through the unfamiliar neighborhoods, I finally come to a traffic light. I was relieved as it meant the highway was nearby. It was almost positive it was to the right, but the light was red, and the signal on the corner stated, "No right turn on red." Who I was to argue with all capital letters? Yet it was so late and none of the houses I passed had lights on, and there were no cars around. Surely it was okay to make a right turn. "Screw it," I said, stepped on the gas. Halfway through the turn, something darted out of the intersection and a loud dull thud echoed through the car, and I slammed on the brakes. At first I didn't react. I just shut off the engine and just sat there, hoping it was an animal. Once the initial shock wore out, my hope turned into assumption. I exited the car with my fingers crossed and my breath held. As I rounded the front of the vehicle, I saw the legs of a child. My heart sank into my stomach, and I fell to my knees, sick and ashamed. I stood up, but not straight, walked over to the child. It was a girl, possibly around 8 years old. She had a little blue backpack. She must have been holding a sleeping bag, which was now laying unraveled a few feet away. She lay face down, her blonde hair covered in red dark blood. One by one, delicate snowflakes touched her down upon her lifeless body. In the hindsights, she resembled some kind of fallen angel. I felt I was being taught a lesson, a harsh one at that. I returned to the car and dialed 911. As I waited for help to arrive, I went over to the incident in my head. Though it was a mere violation, I knew I couldn't tell them I made an illegal right turn, especially when it resulted in such tragedy. As far as everyone was concerned, the light was green. The police arrived with an ambulance, and I went to greet them. When I tried to show them the girl, she had disappeared. There wasn't even any blood on the ground, or an imprint in the snow. "You say you hit someone and they were right there?" "Yes, I saw them. It was a little girl. I swear to God." I had no idea where she had gone, or why was there no evidence that anyone was hit by a car. I probably seemed crazy. "Well, they must have run off. You checked to make sure she wasn't breathing?" No. I saw the blood and she wasn't moving. I was in shock," I replied, feeling like a complete idiot. Of course I should have checked, but I was too busy figuring out how to cover my own ass. To say it was embarrassing wouldn't do justice. "We're going pretty slow. Chances are she was stunned. We'll search the area. She couldn't have gone far. Just sit tight and we'll find her." I sat in silence while they scoured the area for the little girl. Somehow I knew they wouldn't find her, as there were no footprints. My eyelids were getting heavy, and I kept seeing flashes of a girl's body whenever I would drift off for a moment. With each vision, her face gradually turned towards me, her eyes full of sorrow and anger. Just as I was falling asleep, there was a knock on my car window. They hadn't found any sign of the girl, but they would let me know if anything was reported. It was somewhat of a relief, and yet equally unsatisfying. The whole way home I drove under the speed limit, stopping at every intersection when the light was green. I didn't get much sleep that night. The next day I wasn't so thrilled about going to work, but as a new employee, I really had no choice. As ridiculous as it sounds, I got lost again on the way home, and meant to print out some reverse directions, but I was too preoccupied with the events of the previous evening. Once again I drove through the parts unknown, and eventually came to a red light. "Is that the same intersection?" I asked myself. At the time I wasn't sure, but it did have the same sign, "No right turn on red." I was correct about the highway being the right, so I knew I was going to have to make a turn. This time I would wait until the light changed. I'm not sure how much time passed. It must have been at least 20 minutes. The clock on my phone had read stopped at 12:47. I wasn't sure. For a while I just stared at the words, "No right turn on red." Contemplating on why they were mocking me, The light wasn't changing, and my patience was fading. "Are you kidding me?" I protested. I didn't want to do it, but there wasn't any much of a choice. This time I turned very slowly and looked around to make sure no one was there. I thought it was all clear. Just the night before, something darted out in front of the car. "Shit!" I shouted, slamming onto the brakes. "This can't be happening!" I jumped out of the car and rushed to inspect the body. My jaw dropped when I realized it was the same girl. She had the same blue backpack. The same sleeping bag was lying unraveled just a few feet away, and her blonde hair was stained with dark red blood. I didn't know what to think. My mind went completely blank while I stared at the horrific scene. Whatever it was real or not, it was far worse the second time. I retreated to my car again, but this time I hesitated to call the police. I then remembered what the officer said about making sure she was dead. I went back to check, but she was gone. My third day at work was painful. I couldn't concentrate under the circumstances, and no one was going to understand or be sympathetic. Different scenarios kept playing out in my head. I imagined a little girl going to a slumber party. She was having fun with her friends until they pull a cruel prank on her. She calls her mother in tears, but her mother says she's too tired to pick her up and that she must walk home. On the way, I hit her with my car. That was just one of my scenarios, but it seemed almost plausible. I started to think she could be a ghost who had already been struck by someone else's car. Perhaps it was a hit and run, and now she needed someone to find out who killed her. But why me? When my shift ended, I was reluctant to leave. After driving to work a few times, I had finally mesmerized the way home, but I was still afraid of that intersection. That sign. I drove cautiously with eagle eyes and eventually emerged into the highway, invoking a collective sigh of relief from every cell in my body. I smiled and turned off the radio as I accelerated past the speed limit. It seemed like being quite a while to reach my exit, but I was also too tired to find it suspicious. My eyelids were getting heavy, and for a moment I almost fell asleep. As I took the extended blink, I was suddenly somewhere else. The highway was gone, and in front of it was the intersection with the red light, and the sign in the corner persisted, "No right turn on red." What the? I looked around in disbelief. It was the same intersection. How I got there was completely beyond my understanding. Was there some otherworldly force trying to tell me something? Was it my destiny to help this little girl? All I wanted to do was to go home. This time I waited till the light turned green, if I had to wait all night. I think I sat there for a few hours, but my phone had stopped at 12:47 again. Perhaps the little girl died at that time, and the light was still red, and I knew it was never going to change. Something was reaching out for me to help, but I didn't care. I just wanted to go home. I shouted at the traffic light, "Just change already, asshole!" As if it would be imitated. As I became more irate and delusional, the thought of killing the girl for the third time made me become almost desirable. But then I remember how I felt each time. I knew she couldn't be real, but the experiences just was as real as anything. I shook the notion and put my hands firmly on the wheel. I couldn't sit there forever, so there was only one thing to do. "Screw it," I said, and I made a left.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.